think about the whole secure SDLC, right? The secure software development lifecycle. It starts when you're doing, as soon as you're doing architectural high-level system design, you start with threat modeling. You implement certain SaaS, DAST, SCA tools, and I think cloud-native applications are no different in that regard, right? It's still intuitively, it's still an application. It's just that you're deploying it on the cloud. So the application security vulnerabilities still remain to be the same for the most part of it. The difference comes as to what you do next after that.
Welcome to the Elephant in Apps, a podcast to explore, challenge, and boldly face the AppSec elephants in the room. I'm Alexandra, your host, joined by my amazing co-host Tristan, a former security engineer and co-founder of Escape. Today, we're excited to have an amazing guest, Mihir Shah, join us. Mihir is a senior staff application security engineer at ForgeRock, specializing in architecting secure cloud-based identity and access management services hosted using Kubernetes and Google Cloud Platform. He is also the author of the Cloud-Native Software Security Handbook, a comprehensive guide on securing cloud-native applications and services. Also, he serves as an industry mentor at Stanford University Advanced Cybersecurity Program and holds 2 patents on defense against cloud-native infrastructure. Mihir is passionate about learning and sharing his knowledge on cloud-native security, software development security, and serverless computing. He's a frequent speaker at security conferences such as BlackHat, DefCon, and OWASP. Also, he's published multiple articles covering various security topics such as hacking Windows machines and compromising Windows systems. With his passion for the security of cloud-native applications, we've decided to ask him how challenging it actually is. Dive right in. Excited to have you with us on the podcast. It's really very great that you accepted to be our guest, and I'm very happy about it. And sometimes will be published also your new book, so congratulations with the release last year. So very happy for you, and I've seen that received a lot of praise on LinkedIn, actually also, and a lot of positive feedback, and that's how I initially as well came across it. And I think you mentioned that as well, that a lot of people reached out to you afterwards on LinkedIn, like the first time we had a conversation. So I think the one that I remember that I came across was the one of Mark Peters. So I remember, and like his favorite part there was the implementation of actually that you focused on a code heavy, like directives for what, and how to change like the various security requirements. And I guess if you could tell more a little bit about it to our listeners, like how do you actually succeeded, to bridge that gap between the theoretical part in the book and like securing, cloud native applications and focusing on the checkboxes like that a lot of people in security, still do, and actually, practical implementation. So, which was your main focus? So, how did you succeed to strike, that balance?
Sure. Yeah. No. First of all, thanks so much for having me on here and reaching out to me on LinkedIn. So, that's pretty fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, a lot of people have reached out to me. First time authors, aspiring authors, or just folks who are working in the security industry. They're trying to learn about cloud native applications, security things that you could do to kind of make them more secure. So I think there were a lot of questions kind of subdued into that one question. So I'll just break it up and I'll answer it all as
Yeah.
one. So first, to that point on the code implementation part, right? So you had a question about how do you bridge kind of the gap between theory versus actually implementing something that works to secure your cloud native applications, right? So first of all, I mean, no one really likes theory, right? No one on this planet likes to read theory. They want to do something which is very
Wow.
pragmatic, something that's practical. Um, and I think that's like being an engineer. That's like the gain of it. And then you obviously have some checklist criterias, and I have a lot of radical and hot takes on a few topics that I could get into. First of all, as we start with this session.
Like we
Sure,
want to
yeah,
hear all of them.
perfect. Yeah, let's do it. So first of all, as we gonna dive more into this, let me just put it out there that all the views are my own. Like I'm not speaking for my employer or anything. Um, but yeah, when it comes to security or like pen testing, red teaming, a lot of that is just checklist, as you just said. It's like, you have you tried this, have you tried doing that, have you tried doing this, right? And then you kind of have running through those checklists to kind of see if something's vulnerable. But I think from a product security engineering perspective, you're trying to implement security solutions. Like, you're trying to implement certain security programs or pipelines or solutions to make it even more secure, right?
Mhm.
Which is, I think, the goal for product security. And when it comes to cloud native applications, right? I mean, doing application security for apps that you're deploying on the cloud, I think a lot of these security practices can be implemented. Like, you talked about the toolings and things that I've spoken about in the book. And
Mhm.
if you look into that, most of these things could be done at the pipeline level itself, like with the pipeline you're pushing code into on the cloud.
Mhm.
And obviously, it doesn't stop with there. When think about the whole secure SDLC, right? The secure software development lifecycle. It starts when you're doing, as soon as you're doing architectural high level system design, you start with threat modeling. You implement certain SaaS, DAST, SCA tools. And I think cloud native applications are no different in that regard, right? It's still intuitively, it's still an application. It's just that you're deploying it on the cloud. So the application security vulnerabilities still remain to be the same for the most part of it. The difference comes as to what you do next after that, right? Let's say you have some kind of you have some kind of an application security vulnerability, and you're able to gain initial foothold to where that application is deployed. And then comes the question as to what do you do next out of it. If it's deployed on cloud, then you take a little bit of a different avenue to kind of try compromising it, and kind of move laterally or gain more privileges or whatever to gain your
Mhm.
complete, compromise the complete infrastructure. And when it comes from the defensive side to kind of secure your applications, I think application security remains to be the same. It's how do you deploy it on the cloud, and the infra security kind of starts changing a little bit. So I don't remember Mark's review about this, or I know he wrote an article. I don't remember
Mhm.
for the most part of
Yeah.
it, but I think yeah, I think so. The code implementation or the code heavy side of this would be to know what tools to use, to know how do you want to implement them, and obviously, AppSec side, you want to make sure that you have certain SaaS DAS toolings to find those security vulnerabilities in the first place and ensure that doesn't happen again.
Mhm.
Which, yeah, I think I talk a lot about that in the book as well. So.
Yeah. And do you think that the book itself it's good for beginners as well? Because like among our listeners, they're different, levels. There are some people that transitioning into application security from other roles. There are some people who already like have years of experience. Do you think for someone who's, let's say, just starting, is it easy to understand?
I think again, easy and difficult kind of just remains to be on your perspective. But the review that I've had for the most part from the folks who've read my book is that it's not too beginner friendly, right? Just because you talk about cloud native applications, but really what happens to be cloud native is the platform that you've deployed it on, right? So it happens to be cloud infrastructure, Kubernetes, any cloud native platform that you're using. Now, if you're not aware of those technologies inherently, then you're not going to be aware of the security practices that comes later as well, right? Because if you think about security, you need to understand what exactly are you trying to secure in the first place. So if you don't understand how Kubernetes works, how cloud infrastructure works, right? If you never used those services before, you might find it a little difficult to kind of read the book at first. So my suggestion would be to try it out, gain a little bit of an experience with these infrastructures, with these environments, and I think then the book would be more of a gliding experience through it. I recently just learned that my book is currently a learning resource for a few universities in Ireland, and they're teaching a
Okay,
course in they're teaching a course in
it's great.
architecting cloud security solutions or something like that. And and then the book is regarded as one of the resources. So I think if you have that prerequisite knowledge of how do you architect cloud solutions, then the book would be just as an additional knowledge add-on to your skill set.
Okay. And can you like maybe explain it for people maybe who know less, like what it means to have a cloud native application
Oh
in
yeah,
like
yeah, actually.
simple terms, if you would have
Sure,
to?
yeah, no, sure. The thing is, if you Google cloud native application, right, you're gonna find 50 definitions of it.
Mm,
And what's funny is that all of them are true in their own way, right? The thing is, everyone tries to define cloud native. From every engineer that you talk to is gonna define cloud native from their own perspective of using those solutions, and they're all right in a way. So I kind of try to come up with like a generic solution to what it means for an app to be cloud native. I think from a broader term, like from a broader perspective, any app that gets deployed on the cloud is essentially becomes cloud native. But for an app to be truly cloud native, I think as soon as you start developing the any app or any product, if you start if you measure the architecture in terms of how you're going to be deploying it on the cloud, right? How you're going to be automating the deployment, how you're going to be architecting the solution in the cloud, and if you change your application development application architecture based on that, I think that kind of makes the app to be cloud native. Obviously, the I feel the demarcation between cloud native apps and like app and the infrastructure is more blurred than ever, because with infra as code, with security policy as code, and things like that, you're kind of writing code to deploy all of these things on the cloud. So I think that's what makes the app to be cloud native. Eventually, if it gets deployed on the cloud and you're architecting the solution, architecting the app in a way that gets, eventually that it's going to get deployed on the cloud. I think that's what makes an application cloud native. So to give you an example, right? I mean, I don't want to go on a stretch on here, but just kind of make a point more clearer, right? If before the whole cloud natives landscape, right, you still had microservices, you still had all of those good architectural, uh, you know, you still had all of those things. It's just that you deployed it in a different way. You deployed it; it was all on one system, and obviously you had horizontal scaling and all of that. But now with so many, so many avenues available, you might want to deploy something as as a lambda function, as an event-driven,
Mm-hmm.
function as code, or you might want to deploy something using one of the managed services of one of the cloud native vendors, or you might just want to deploy something on an instance, right? If you're
Mm-hmm.
using AWS on an EC2 instance or something. And the way this all of these kind of come together to eventually deliver your app solution is what makes your application to be cloud native, as opposed to deploying it on prem or something like that.
Okay. Very good.
And do you think like if an application has not been designed to be cloud native, it's more prone to be like to have vulnerabilities when being switched to the cloud? Or are the applications that have been created with cloud architectures in mind more vulnerable compared to classic apps?
I think 100% apps that are not designed to be cloud native are more vulnerable
Okay.
to attack. And to give you a very simple example, right? The most infamous AWS IMDS version 1 SSRF attack, right? If you talk about SSRF, server side request forgery, you have an app suffering through SSRF, but if it's deployed on the IMDS version 1 of an EC2 instance on AWS, you have the most infamous data breach. I think Capital One had an attack in the similar scenario where they had huge security breach. So an application, let's say, there are two applications, both suffer from SSRF. One that you've deployed on-prem on a system somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
on a web server, and one that you've deployed on an AWS EC2 instance with IMDS version 1. And with that SSRF vulnerability, I could essentially compromise your entire cloud landscape, right? And your entire cloud
Mm-hmm.
posture.
Yeah.
And not to say that I'm not trying to kind of demote SSRF vulnerability. Obviously, even if it exists on-prem, you should still fix it. But it's just that the things that you could do after identifying that a vulnerability exists, the potential for you as an attacker to do bad things is more on cloud environments. And especially, if you don't think about and from what I've seen in the industry, especially in the past 10 years, with the boom in cloud, the cloud landscape,
Mm-hmm.
more and more companies are developing or migrating their solutions which were once developed on-prem, and they're migrating it on cloud, right? And there's only so much that you can think about it. There are already hundreds of things that you have to worry about when you're deploying things on cloud, which services to use, vendor lock and interoperability, and all of that good stuff. So I think from my experience, I think applications that were developed on-prem and now migrating on cloud are more prone to security vulnerabilities, as opposed to if you have inherently been thinking about security when developing apps for cloud.
That makes total sense. And so you wrote actually a book about that. And I've never wrote about myself, but I'm an entrepreneur. I created a company, and I had to do a lot of research, including like interviews for like finding the project and defining the need. Um, what was your process for writing the book? What was your journey? Like, how did you start? How did you find the right information? How did you sort it?
Yeah, 100%. First of all, I think finding a company is 100% way more difficult than writing a book, for
Okay.
sure. Uh, so kudos to you on that. But I think, so as far as writing book, I think a lot of people have asked me about this, and there's actually an interview as well that I did with my publishers and a few other
Mhm.
major media reporters. I think so. This happened very serendipitously for in my case, right? The publishers had reached out to me almost 3-4 years ago to write a book, And at that time, I didn't really want to write a book. It's a big undertaking, and I didn't know if I was ready for it. So I kind of turned them down at that point. And and coincidentally, they reached out to me almost a year ago. At this point, I feel maybe a little late than a year ago. And actually, even before, I guess they reached out to me in like December of 2022 or something, November, December of 2022, to write a book. And at that point, I kind of felt that this I saw a gap in the market today where engineers weren't really thinking about security from a cloud native perspective. Things do change, from cloud native perspective, and I think that's what kind of motivated me to write a book. But and then obviously, I think there was an absolute 6 months of research even before I started writing the book. Because as a professional, you do know a lot of things, because you're working on them on a day-to-day basis, but that does not equate to you being able to write a book, because it's a very lonely process, right? To write a book, you just
Yeah.
have a blank sheet of document, and it's just you in front of your
Yeah.
computer, scratching your head, thinking about what you're going to be writing next, right?
Right.
So I think it was a very and the thing is, you get a lot of thoughts, and you have to organize those thoughts as well to a reader, right? So it might be clearer to you because you've just researched about a lot of things, but a reader who's trying to understand what you're trying to say, they might not understand if you don't organize your thoughts in a particular fashion, particular manner, right? So I think the next part was, for me, was once I was done, I felt that I have enough research content and I know what I want to talk about. The next part was organizing that in a way that kind of made sense to an avid reader. um, the one advice I might have to any aspiring authors is, first of all, if you're writing your first book, don't write it by yourself, always have a co-author, because it just makes it a little easier to kind of speak with someone as you write the book, right?
It's like in the
Obviously, I
business.
didn't have,
It's like in
yeah,
the
I mean, same with the
business,
business,
you need a
exactly.
co-founder.
exactly
It makes it
exactly
Yeah.
yeah.
easier.
Yeah, and I'm sure, I mean, I want to pick your brain on how did you do it, because I'm sure, like, obviously, you 100%, you cannot run a business by yourself. You need a lot of folks to work with, and especially if it's just an idea. um, but yeah, I mean, let me I'll finish with this first, but I'm definitely more interested in learning about what you've done, and what do you do. So yeah, so with this book, the one advice I might have is, we as humans have tendency to make everything perfect and only then move on to the next thing, which I think doesn't really work. Perfect, as the saying goes, right? Perfect is the enemy of good. So my advice would be to kind of first write as many thoughts as you get, just throw them on the paper, and eventually you are going to refine it. You are going to make, obviously there can be a lot of grammatical errors, typos, all of those things, and there might be certain logical flow changes, structural changes within the book that you'd want to make. A lot of technical errors as well. So just write as much as you can, and then kind of start the editing phase of the book. My book had almost 4 or 5 technical reviewers as I was writing the book, and there were a lot of technical mistakes that I made as writing the book as well, and they kind of pointed out to me, and we kind of changed the book as we moved along the way. So I think it's obviously a very time enduring process. You have to kind of you have to have a discipline, as a lot of people say, because you can't write 100 pages in a day itself. You have to break it up into sections of the book, to pages of the book, to kind of make it work. So I think that would be my advice. And the other part would be to be current in the industry as well, like as you're writing the book, because so this funny thing happened to me, right? When I started writing the book, Kubernetes was on version 1.24, 1.26 or something. And by the time I completed writing the book, the latest version out was 1.27, 1.28, I guess. So I had to go back and change a lot of things as I was writing them. And so I
How
think it's
much
important to
time?
be.
How much time did it take you to make all those changes afterwards?
Oh, lot of time. There was a lot of back and forth with my editors, for the most part of it. As soon as I complete writing a chapter, I complete writing a section of it, and then it goes to the technical reviewers, the editors, and all of those guys, and then I move on to writing the next chapter, and then I get the feedback back from the first chapter. I have to go edit and make those corrections, and there's a lot of back and forth with a lot of people, right? So I think there was a lot of back and forth. I lost the count about it, but for each chapter that I was writing, there was a lot of back and forth. But I'm glad that it happened, right? Because it kind of just made the book more refined and more applicable in your day to day. Because you get everyone's take on it, right? No, someone who's reading it for the first time, someone who's very well seasoned professional in the industry, and you get everyone's take, and you kind of agglomerate all of that together, and then you kind of move forward with that, right? So I think I liked that process, but I think it's very similar to how you'd run a business. So how was your experience, like bootstrapping, a new startup, and like going about it?
So the thing is, I think a book at some point you have to release it and you have to make it public. And you know, like you have to, you have to publish it at some point. With a startup, the difference. So I agree on the fact that you need to find someone to talk with. And personally, I know some co-founder Antoine. We met during our studies, and we started working together on side projects before starting Escape. So it really was like a classic way of finding a co-founder and seeing that we can work together. But the difference is for a startup, and especially when you're doing a tech startup, a SaaS startup, like what we are doing at Escape, it's never finished. The product is never finished. You keep pushing updates all the time, and you never reach a point where you can say, hey, my product is finished, or I'm going to stop working on it and do something else. No, like you just continue to update it because the technologies change, and you said it even for your book because it's about technical topics. Like the Kubernetes version changed while you were writing it. And for Escape, everything evolves so fast, and the technologies evolve so fast, and there is this new framework, and there is this new shiny cloud environment here, and this new kind of APIs, and you have to support it. And so it's like a continuous improvement process, and you are running to catch up with the industry, to catch up with the environment that is evolving all the time. So there is this challenge, and you really feel that this is something that you build over time, like over years, and you learn about the landscape, about technical landscape, and you improve it over time. It's really like a long-term process.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. And as a founder, I think you're not just focused on product development as well. You also have to worry about marketing. You have to worry about selling the product, and you also have to worry about all of that stuff around actually making the company successful.
Yeah, so this is true, and especially among engineers that start companies at the beginning, they have this. Sometimes they do this mistake thinking that if they build a great and outstanding product, people will just come and find it and start using it and start paying for it, which in practice never happens. It never happens like that. You have to go talk to people. You have to learn how to sell. You have to do like outstanding support. You have to listen to them. Most people, they want to be listened as well. They don't just want to use a product. They want to feel listened by the people behind the product. So really there is this part, and it's specifically hard for engineers or people with a technical background to understand that it's not only about product development, it's not only about having the best technology, but it's also, first of all, about understanding your customers and how do you bring your product in the hands of the right person.
Yeah, I'd 100% agree with that. But in your experience, do you think I'm sure I kind of read your profile as well, and then I saw that you have an engineering background as well. And do you think it makes sense for new first time startup founders to have join an accelerator program? Do you think it helps in making more connections or in getting more clients, or kind of help marketing the product better?
This is a super interesting question. So you might have seen that at Escape, and we're switching away from the main topic, but I can speak about that for a minute. So it's at Escape we went at Y Combinator, which I really advise to do because it really puts you in this specific mood of the relentless startup founder, where you know that you will have a lot of problems along the way, that this is a complicated process for creating a startup. But if really you adapt, you improvise, you talk to your users the whole time, and specifically the thing when you're at Y Combinator, for instance, YC, you can talk with people that had the same experience as you, and yet created super successful startups like Twitch, like GitLab, like Airbnb, and many others. And when you listen to them speaking, you understand that all the people and all the startups founders, they had the same struggle, and they just had creative ways of solving the problems, which make their company successful at the end. And knowing this and being in touch with those people really helps you, like, understanding if you are in the right direction or not, and the effort that you need to put in order to make your company successful.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Like if one day you want to create a company, I really advise you to apply to YC. That's the short answer.
Is it why you're asking?
Oh well, no, I don't think I'm there just yet. But yeah, I mean, it's good advice for the future for sure. But yeah, I've always thought of YC as more of a Reddit, Reddit subreddit channel for all the founders to
Yeah,
kind of discuss stuff on. But
yeah.
interesting. Uh,
Yeah, I think I'm gonna back to the beginning of the conversation where you mentioned that you have some hot takes, on the topic because we love
We do love hot takes.
controversial opinions and hot takes. So, what is like your number one hot take for the
I
to
think
talk about the conversation or not?
Sure. I think my biggest hot take, or and this is going to be a very radical point of view that I have, is that I feel cybersecurity isn't special, and hear me out with this. I feel, and when I say cybersecurity isn't special, what I'm getting at is that product or application security engineering, of itself, isn't very special. Because so I'm also an industry mentor at Stanford University, and I speak with a lot of founders such as yourself. I mean, not just in the security space, but in the SaaS space. We're trying to deliver some kind of a retail solution to customers, right? And I speak with a lot of engineering teams with in that process as well. And one problem that I've seen, even working as an AppSec engineer over the years by myself, I actually started working out as a software engineer back, almost a decade ago, I guess, at this point in the industry. And as I was working as a software engineer, I was very inquisitive to learn about security stuff. So I kind of got gravitated more towards AppSec, and I then pivoted my career to being a full-time AppSec engineer. But the one point of conflict, if I might put it that way, with software engineers and AppSec engineers, is that you see a lot of pushback from software engineers with, either that they don't agree on a security vulnerability that you as an AppSec engineer might have identified, or they do agree with it, but they wouldn't really agree with, the impact of that vulnerability and a lot of things that go along with it. The one reason for that is because software engineers look at AppSec engineers, as a gatekeepers, right? So they don't look at security engineers as, and I don't blame them, right? Honestly, I don't blame them, because if I, as a software engineer, have worked day in day out to deliver a solution, to deliver a feature, and if someone's telling me that what I've written is total crap, I'm gonna be super pissed about it, right? So. And a lot of security engineering is like calling someone's baby ugly, right? No one really likes to hear it. So I think the one caveat, like the one solution to do it, to not having that, is I feel all security engineers, especially in the product space, should once always start as a software engineers, just because they can put themselves in that software engineer's shoes, or they can wear that hat, and then you know create a little more empathy towards software engineers, if I might put it that way, right, in identifying security vulnerabilities. And I feel, even from a cultural standpoint in the industry and the company that you're working at, it just makes it a lot more easier to work with software engineers if they respect you for, who you are, right? If you've never done software engineering, if you don't understand exactly what they're working on, it's going to be very difficult to collaborate with them on that, right? Which, you have this whole concept of security champions and AppSec engineers, right? So like, you have someone from the development team who's excited about security, and then kind of work with them on having them fix it. But startups don't really have that flexibility or that privilege to have so many folks dedicated to doing just one part of job, right? To have an AppSec engineer, to have software engineers, and to have a security champion on top of that. You don't have that privilege, right? There's a lot of work to be done, and there's limited time that you have to get it done in. So as a security engineer, I think for you to have that influence over engineering teams, for you to have that for even for you to have that experience and that knowledge set, to know, to know, to quantify a vulnerability, to identify and know how to fix it, is going to be an added value. So I feel security is just more of an extension to QA, if I might put it that way, right? It's if you think about it, security is just uh, another testing, but with a very laser focus on finding something that could get compromised, right? And yeah, and you should also know the software development trade-offs with fixing that security vulnerability. To give you an example, right, we talk a lot about threat modeling. Um, and in my and one of my examples is, when I was doing threat modeling for as a third party contractor for a new startup company, and they were just looking to go to the market, right? And there was an authentication authorization vulnerability in that startup company's environment. And to fix that, I came up with a security design security design in my mind and kind of pitched that to the engineering teams. But it had a lot of trade-offs with the efficiency and the way that they had architected a solution, right? It just made it a lot worse in the efficiency side of it. So I've always believed that security should not come at cost of your business solution, because if you don't have a business running, right, if you have downtime, there's nothing to secure about, right? You're trying to secure a vulnerability, but if the business isn't running or if it's way too slow, it doesn't make sense to have security with that. So you should have that architectural know-how, you should have that knowledge or skill set on how to design software solutions, and then add security on top of that, right? So you have to come up with those creative solutions where security is not looked at as something that is, an impeding factor to your development life cycle or to the efficiency of your system. So yeah, I think that's my biggest hot take with security, which is like, be good software engineers. And I think security is something that should come intuitively. In my experience, software engineers make the best security AppSec engineers as well, as opposed to, someone who's switching over from network or infra security. Yeah.
I think that's what we've seen a lot among our podcast guests as well. I think yours background is the same. You come from a software developer transition into the security engineer. So that's where you listen really a lot. But how, in this case, let's say, would you train a developer in your organization where you work on like to secure cloud native applications? Like what would be the specifics for that?
Okay, so this is another hot take from me, right?
Okay.
If you just go online and if you Google about developer security training programs, you're gonna find a lot of companies are running, a lot of these programs to kind of coach. I'm gonna put it in quotes, quote unquote, coach your developers about security practices. The reason I'm not a big fan of those programs is because if you think about why do you want to train developers for security stuff, right? The core reason for that is that when I as a developer start writing code, it should come intuitively to me as to the security vulnerabilities that might rise out of that, right? So if let's say I'm creating a forum page, for example, so as soon as I'm writing those forum page, I'm writing those fields, I'm doing that design, it should strike me as a developer that this might be vulnerable to XSS, for example, or storage, whatever security vulnerabilities that might rise out of that. And it doesn't happen overnight, right? It wouldn't be that if I binge watch a security series solution that I'm going to start thinking about it intuitively in my work as well. So and I always am very conscious about engineers time as well, right? Because they're already under a lot of pressure to deliver a lot of solutions. And if you say that you have to do this, it's very similar to the HR solutions that you get, the companies, you have to complete that training annually, and no one really likes it, but you still have to do it. It's just a compliance thing, you still have to do it. So my take with guiding engineers or training engineers would be from a very practical standpoint, right? CTF is one of the best examples, to have that hands-on training sessions with engineers. And then so I did a very similar training session with my with my company as well. We created a lot of CTF solutions, and we intentionally make it vulnerable. And the way we designed it was to not make it very obvious what the vulnerability is, right? Because in real life, if you look at bug bounty or pen testing solutions, they don't tell you that this is vulnerable to SQL injection, and you don't just try SQL injection, for example. You try a lot of things, you chain vulnerabilities together, you find higher impact, and then you fix the code. So create a very real life like app solution, which is obviously a CTF, and then throw it to the developers, and not just throw it to them, but obviously teach them about security vulnerabilities first, and then work with them, with that CTF day or hackathon event, whatever that is, and work with them to finding those vulnerabilities. So finding that vulnerability is the first part, as an attacker would, right? Just as an attacker would. Once you've exploited that vulnerability, then show them the code base for that, right? And then ask them what exactly might have gone wrong, because now they have the backside of an attacker, because we've already attacked and compromised the application, so they know how to attack it, right? And then show them the code base, and then ask them to identify and fix the code base then and there itself, and then deploy it again, and then see if you can still attack it, right? You do these events back and again, it automatically creates that, as a developer, it'll intuitively come to you the next time you're writing code for the company, for the app that you're working on. It'll intuitively come to you that, I saw this vulnerability before when I was doing this hackathon or the CTF, the event, and now you don't not have that again, as opposed to just binge watching security videos, or the programs that currently have those things going, right? So I think that would be like my take to training developers for security stuff.
And do you have like any personal, stories from your side where I don't know, related to the security of the applications, maybe not specifically with the developers related, but let's say we talk about like security side of things.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I used to do a lot of, I speak at a lot of events and I'm a trainer at a lot of events as well. So I do a lot of training events as well. The one thing that I've seen, and the reason that I say I feel software engineers are the best security AppSec engineers is because I have seen that, when I try to explain a security vulnerability to a software engineer versus someone who's doing, network security, for example, I've seen that gap in understanding what the vulnerability is. So for someone who's trying to switch from network security, for example, to product or application security versus someone from a software engineering background wanting to shift to application security, I feel the gap between software engineering and AppSec is way thinner, as opposed to someone who's trying to move from network security to soft application security. So I think in all of my training sessions that I've done with developers, they have been very quick in understanding what's wrong with the code, and they've been very quick in understanding what the vulnerability is or what we're trying to fix, right?
Mhm.
And now that you have DevOps engineers, they're also taking care about the operation side of things to deploy stuff on cloud. And if you talk about cloud security vulnerabilities and things like that, I feel DevOps engineers are pretty quick in understanding what the vulnerability is. So I think the gap that I see in the industry today is not that they don't understand security. It's just that they're not aware of security. It's once you explain them what that security vulnerability is, then they're already aware of it. Then comes the matter of if you can keep it in mind as you're developing code and always be instructive of not making that same mistake again, which only comes with time, right? I mean, it only comes with, if you start attacking more applications, the more you do security stuff around it, that it'll come off to you intuitively. So I think my take with engineers, especially in these training sessions, is that if you don't know about security stuff, it's just that you don't know about it. There's not a skill set problem. There's only a knowledge problem with that. Once you learn about it, I'm sure you're gonna be a good AppSec engineer as well. So that's my take on this for sure.
Okay, and let's say you were previously a developer. You said you have really big, passion for security, and in your organization, you said you just started with your security career. If you have to apply it, in the context of the cloud native applications, what would be like the priority actions to do for first maybe evaluation, the posture or something like that? What would be like actions that you should do to evaluate the security of cloud native apps?
Okay, so I'm gonna answer this in three different parts, right? One, let's say you're a
Okay.
junior software engineer. Let's say you're just starting out as a Korean software engineer who is maybe interested in security. Let's take that example for now. Um, so my advice to them would be, be the best software engineer first, because understand what makes something more efficient, what makes something architecturally stand out, uh, because when you start doing security, you're not even gonna, if you don't understand the efficiency, you don't understand the architecture of designs and things like that, you're not gonna understand the trade-offs between security and software engineering. So my advice would be to be a good software engineer, start with that. But then also, you can concurrently learn about security as well. So there are a lot of learning resources. OWASP has a lot of good tools and directions out there, right, that you can kind of refer to. Obviously my book is one of them, so you could
Of
read
course.
that as well. That'll
We'll
be
put
one of my
the
advice.
link. We'll put the link under the podcast for everyone.
Oh yeah, that'd be, yeah, see, I'm already good at marketing, I guess, at this point, so I'm halfway there with starting my company. Okay. So that'll be my take. And the next part would be, let's say you're a seasoned software engineer and you want to do a lot more security, especially in the cloud native side. From a DevOps perspective, the good thing is that you already understand how these technologies work. You understand how the app works. You understand how the deployment structure of that works. You understand how the underlying infrastructure of that works. Now the only thing you have to understand is everything that could go wrong with that, right? So uh, you know so from a security standpoint, I would say, if you think about security, it's a very research driven industry. I feel like, let's say if no one finds any vulnerabilities starting tomorrow, everyone stops finding out security, everyone stops doing bad things to apps and your infrastructure. You're not going to have, if it's like the thief and the police problem, right? If there are no thieves, you're not going to need a police any day soon, right? So I feel it's a very security research driven industry. So always try to stay up to date with research. If there are new CVEs coming out, if there are new vulnerabilities coming out, right, either on the infrastructure that you're using or the app that you're developing, right? Be on top of that. We all love using open source libraries, open source solutions. Make sure you're on top of that. And I think, from as an employee, from a corporate standpoint, take those additional responsibilities. A manager's always going to like it, so there's always that. As a software engineer, take additional responsibilities to make sure that the 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 feature or the thing that you're trying to develop for your team, you can take that additional responsibility to make sure that it's secure as well. Work with your engineer, work with your product security teams. If you're with a medium SME companies, I'm sure you have a dedicated security team, so they'd always be happy to help you. But yeah, I think, and especially when it comes to cloud native deployments, it's just about learning those things and doing it in real time. I always advise developers to do bug bounty as well, uh, you know, because it keeps you on top of. First of all, it's good money, right? So no one can deny it. No one's going to complain about having a few additional dollars in their bank account. So that's like
Have
one of the
you have
motivations.
you done it? Have you done it yourself?
I used to do a lot of bug bounty. That is actually how I got into the AppSec space. I used to do a lot of bug
Okay.
bounty. I feel like after a few years of doing it, it just becomes very monotonous. Because you're constantly trying to find bad things. I don't know. At least in my case, I didn't have that feeling of contentness. Because as a software engineer, you create something, you see something running, you feel that contempt in yourself that you created something out of nothing. With bug bounty, I think it's just the paychecks hitting your bank account, which is the contentness that you could get out of doing that bug bounty in of itself. A lot of that is hit and miss, right? You can try finding vulnerabilities. You'd either come across, stumble upon something, or you might just not, right? So I've done a lot of bug bounty. I just feel that I've become a little bit, I don't do it as much as I used to do it. But it's obviously 100% a good space to gain practical exposure, especially if you're a student or if you're trying to break into the industry, and no one's hiring you. You could start with bug bounty, show your worth. You get a good recognition. So I think that's a good idea.
You mentioned
Um,
like that it's good to learn also open source solutions. So what do you know any open source solutions for like cloud native security that you would recommend to share?
Yeah, I first of all, I've been following CNCF. I'm currently one of the technical. I'm a part of their security technical advisory group. CNCF is the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. They're the developers, maintainers of platforms like Kubernetes and hundreds of other tools and platforms and plugins that you'd want to use. And they have a lot of security solutions as well. I think HashiCorp, they started out as an open source solution with Terraform and Vault and whatnot. Right, they're all part of CNCF, similar to what we have in OWASP. Right, you have so many open source security solutions. CNCF hosts a lot of them as well. So a lot of it, and my in my book, I talk about a lot of CNCF tools as well. So a part of that is researching about those tools, understanding how to implement it. But my advice would be not to spend a lot of time just reading about it, right? Because I'd advise just break into it, get your hands dirty, start implementing the tools. You're going to face a lot of issues, but that's why that's what you have Google for, right? So reach out to people, reach out to
But
folks, create
ChatGPT
issues.
now.
Oh, you have ChatGPT now, exactly. Yeah, you have ChatGPT now. So yeah, I think just get dirty with the tools. Just do a Google about, if you're trying to do secrets rotation, for example, there are so many tools out there that you'd be able to do it.
Mhm.
If you're looking for API gateways or API security, I don't know, maybe look into Escape's solution, or that'd be.
Nice.
No, I'm just kidding with that, but
You can
uh,
always recommend it.
always recommend it, exactly. So yeah, but I think for open source, there are a lot of tools that you could use. Just research about it. I think someone created a website called TLDR or tools.sec or something. I'd have to look into that. But someone created like a website which is like an agglomeration of all those tools. So you create the tags. Let's say you're doing DevOps or cloud security. So you select AWS, you select application security, you select static analysis, and it's going to show you a list of all the static analysis tools that you could use. Open source, closed, licensed, all of those good things.
Yeah,
And
so I
yeah, I
think
think that's
one of them is like Glacier Attack. It's actually one of the security people
Directories
that we yeah
for tools, yes.
for tools. Yeah, we collaborate. Like I also had discussions. It was created by James Berdati. So it's very useful to discover exactly like all the tools there
yeah.
because with all the acronyms that exist, it's helpful.
Yeah, and I think, and it's not just the tools that I feel a lot of your day to day is also automation. I'm a strong believer in automation. I feel as an engineer, uh, in the security space, now be it anything, right? I feel your day to day as an AppSec engineer should not just be bug bounty, or should not just be reviewing the tool findings or anything like that, right? Because an analyst could do that as well, but you as an engineer should be developing security solutions at scale, right? So if you think about doing anything at scale across companies, you have to automate as much as you can. Uh, you know, I've done a lot of cross-functional projects with our cloud teams on the IT side, on the corporate or enterprise security side as well, where a lot of the telemetry data from application was used as log analysis through our Splunk and other open source tools that we're doing. There was a very interesting talk that I attended on KubeCon last year, where someone was using OpenTelemetry. OpenTelemetry is a cloud native CNCF tool, and they were using OpenTelemetry to find application security vulnerabilities within the apps that they that created. And now I think they have a whole company running around it. They've created a product which uses OpenTelemetry under the hood. And they're finding application security vulnerabilities using that. So I feel as an engineer, it is your day to day should involve using tools like this to deliver to engineers some kind of a bigger. It should solve a bigger security problem across your company. Which is like some of the remarks of a good security engineer, in my opinion.
Did you already like implement, let's say, take a partially one tool or let's say open source tools and actually build in your organization something on top of that? Because that's what I've heard, from some people in application security. They take part of the tool and then they actually build and improve something within their organization and automate as well. Do you have an example of doing something like this to share?
Yeah, definitely. So, one of which I also talk about in my book as well. You could so, and first of all, I'm a big believer of using those open source tools versus developing something in house, because you should be very much aware of your time, right? I feel your time is equal to money. So every time that you propose a new project, you should, even as a security engineer, you should have some kind of a tangible some kind of a tangible outcome or deliverable of that security problem that you're trying to solve. A lot of time, security, and I'm going to answer your question there as well, but a little bit of a tangent in there. I feel a lot of times security engineers are seen as an insurance for the company, right? We proactively try to find vulnerabilities, but you can't really put a number to that. It's like you're trying to prevent something bad, from something bad happening. But if someone were to ask you what exactly is the value that you're developing for the company in terms of revenue, it's very difficult to put a number to that. So I feel when you develop or create these solutions where you solve security problems at scale, one direct hit is that you're solving engineering time, right? If you didn't have this security problem in time, some engineer would have to spend their time fixing something or to detect something as well, and that equates to some time value as well. So I feel as an engineer, if you could solve something at scale, that should be the first thing. And how much time do you take to implement a solution, right? So where the concept of using some open source tool or even licensed tool to that extent comes into picture, and then building on top of that. So one example that I'd give, where I've done this in the past and a bunch of others, is you have this EFK stack, Elasticsearch, Fluentd, and Kibana, which is really just log analysis solution that you might want to have, right? The problem is, how do you deploy this on cloud solutions, right? Now, if you're using Kubernetes, there are a lot of Kubernetes Helm deployments that you could do on your cluster. And what security detections do you put on top of that to find those vulnerabilities? So one project that I did was we deployed the EFK stack on our Kubernetes platform, and this is an open source project that I did with OWASP a while ago. Um, where you could deploy an EFK stack. And we started collecting that data. And obviously, it gets stored in your Elasticsearch database. And, you have Kibana as your front end, and you tried running a lot of parsers to find that data. And we had all of that. And we combined that, we collated that data with, so we use a code navigation engine called CloudQL. I think it's run by GitHub now. They acquired it
Yeah.
a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we use a tool called Semrep, where you can write certain rules and detection methodologies, and you can run it through a code navigation engine. So you collect data from EFK stack, right? You try to send some kind of junk data to your server, and you try to detect code analysis, code vulnerabilities using CodeQL and Semrep, and you want to verify if that finding from CodeQL and Semrep is actually true or not. you try sending that data, similar to what a dash tool does, to your server, and you collect that data, you collect the underlying log data from the EFK stack, and you could automate this across all of your solutions, right? And you can find novel security threats that otherwise a pen tester might or might not find. You could do this at scale for all the applications, all the features that you're developing. So I've kind of gone into great depths about explaining the architecture and how does this work in my book as well. But that would be, projects like these is, I think, what brings ultimate value to your product teams that you're supporting. But yeah, so that'd be like one of the examples to answer your question as to how you do it.
So this is the kind of thing that you see are like the future of cloud security or cloud application security. For you, it's like combining static and dynamic approaches and have like some kind of integrated way of finding vulnerabilities to go further than from just like static scanning or either like a pen test.
Exactly. Yeah. So, this is combining, as you just said, right? Combining static dynamic analysis on your cloud environments. And I feel the main benefit is that you can automate this because you're using so many tools. You could automate this across your entire posture landscape, right? As opposed to if you were pen testing it, you'd run the tools, but you don't have that novel insight from underlying infrastructure as an outsider pen tester, right? In the cloud native environment, if you're hosting this on AWS, you can collect cloud native, CloudWatch logs, CloudTrail log data. Bunch of these services you can collect novel data. Those are like novel data points for you where you can source your data from. And then the only problem is collating that data with the static analysis, dynamic analysis scanning that you do, right? So it kind of has to make sense when you put those two things together. But yeah, I think that definitely is the future when a lot of CNAP apps that you see, cloud native application security, platform management apps. I think creating solutions.
So in this context, do you have like any advice for like young listeners that would like, for instance, typical case would be like a young software engineer that wants to start security, and they don't really know where the industry is going, like about cloud security and cloud native application security. So do you have an advice for them and how to plan their career and be successful?
Yeah, I think for the whole cloud computing industry with the boom in Gen AI and whatnot, I think it's just more use cases for your cloud infrastructure. So just start learning about these, and learning. No one really, as I was saying, no one really likes reading documentation and theory and all of that stuff. So the way I did it was start exploring those services, start using those services. You get a lot of free credits if you're a student, you're young. Start getting dirty with it. Learn how to use it. That should be your first goal. Once you've got a good grasp of it, you've learned how to use these technologies. Start learn. Like if you're not a seasoned security professional, you're not gonna start thinking about what could go wrong with it, right? You're not gonna come up with anything. So the next step would be to read those security articles, to follow a few folks who are doing good work in security and who are researching these security vulnerabilities, and start grasping their thinking process, right? If they're trying to attack something, start thinking about how do they think in finding security vulnerabilities or fixing security vulnerabilities, and follow their thinking process, follow their mindset, and start duplicating it. One advice would be create CTF solutions, right? A very good security engineer is a very bad software developer. If create those vulnerable applications yourself, try attacking it, understand how to fix it, uh, and do the same on the cloud infrastructure as well. Like intentionally create vulnerable applications, deploy it on cloud in a vulnerable way, and see how attackers actually exploit it. And so the next time you come across something like that yourself, you're gonna know that what's wrong with it and how to fix it by yourself. So that would be my one advice to young professionals or someone who's just starting out in this.
And if you would have to recommend someone's, book apart from yours, that would be actually practical as well. But who would you recommend?
Sure. I mean, if you don't want to read the best book, if I have to put some other book in place, no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding with that. Okay. Uh, but I think there are a lot of good books in terms of. So I'll split this answer in two parts, right? One is the application security side of it, like product security side of it, and then is the cloud security side of it, right? So for web apps, I think if you just want to read books, I think Web App Hacker's Handbook is an amazing book. OWASP Web Security Testing Guide is a good, it's a good pre handbook that you might have. You obviously have software assurance maturity model from OWASP and things like that. For hands-on practice, Portswigger, Burp Suite, they have good labs you can practice on, purely from a product security standpoint. For cloud security, I feel the industry is a little new to that. Obviously, cloud has been around since past 10, 15 years, but from a security standpoint, uh, there are a lot of good books. Cloud security, I think empirical cloud security. The title of the book is Empirical Cloud Security, which is something that I've read a few years ago, which I think is a good book. Um, from an infrasec standpoint, I'd just say read documentation from your cloud vendors. AWS maintains a good engineering blog for security stuff that you could do with them, with a lot of their services. So I think stay up to date, read as much as you can with them, and all cloud vendors do that. GCP does that. Azure really sucked 10 years ago. I used to write them. They didn't have good API services, but now I think they've improved a lot since the past 7 8 years, I guess. So read Azure documentation. But I think as far as cloud security goes, try to gain as much as practical exposure as opposed to reading books as you can. Obviously, I don't count my book in it. We but try to gain as
Yours
much as
should be
practical.
read.
Yeah, mine should be, yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think that'll be my advice. Like these are the few books, but besides that, I think very really gonna find more value is attend those meetup events, right? Attend meetups, attend conferences, network with people. I think that'll be a good starter point for anyone.
Well, thank you so much for your advice. I think we're approaching the end of our podcast, so thank you a lot for sharing stories with us, your hot takes with us as well. So we'll share all the links in the end of the podcast with our audience. And thank you so much.
Sounds good. And thanks so much for having me. This was, an absolute delight. So best of luck, with the company. I wish you continued success. Yeah, and hope to see you guys soon.
Yeah, thank you,
Right.
Mihir. Glad to have you on the as a guest for this episode.
Thank you.